Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. Today I have the top 21 high-end farmhouse DIYs for 2021. You know you don't want to miss all my favorite DIYs in one video. So let's get on with the DIYs. Now for our first DIY. Today I have a fun and easy DIY. I'll be making a lantern using skewers. The hardest part of this DIY was getting the skewers to bend. What I had to do is put them in hot water on the stove. I left the top part of the skewer out of the water and then placed a pickle jar full of water on the skewers where I wanted them to bend. I left them in the hot water for about an hour, and I think I had turned the eye to like medium. I then took them out and placed them in my son's bathroom sink. Since he's not home, he doesn't use that bathroom. I also placed the pickle jar still sitting on the top of the skewers until the next morning. And believe it or not, it actually worked. It bent them just like you're seeing now. I used a square block. I think it originally had some kind of picture on it. It was already painted a very light gray color, so I just drilled 4 small holes in the corners that were just a little bit larger than the skewers. I filled each hole with hot glue and placed the skewer into the hole, making sure it was pointed towards the center. I did this with all 4 skewers. I placed 18 16mm natural wood beads on the skewers. The beads I use, I get from Amazon, so I'll leave a link in the description if you want to take a look at them. I found this little topper in my stash. I'm not really sure what to call it. I think I got it from wish.com a while back. I ordered several things from there to see how they would work as craft supplies. The items I've used so far have been great. If you don't mind waiting up to 6 weeks, you should check wish.com out for some of your supplies. I wouldn't recommend ordering clothes, shoes, or jewelry, but I will vouch for the craft supplies that I've used, and they've worked out great. And the absolutely best part is they were extremely cheap. I filled the hole in the topper up with hot glue and placed all 4 of the skewer ends in it. I turned it upside down to let the hot glue dry because I didn't want it running down the skewers and onto my beads and making a big mess. The next thing I did was add 4 20mm beads to the bottom for feet. I left all the beads and the topper the natural color, but you can paint it to any color that will match your decor. I may actually paint it white and do a little distressing. I just haven't decided yet. I added a white pillar candle to the lantern and decided it needed a little something else. I found this wreath material in my stash. I placed it around the candle and then used green floral wire to hold everything together. just still wasn't happy with the look. So I used some Dollar Tree reindeer moss. I applied Mod Podge to the entire round piece and added the reindeer moss on top of it. I left it sitting on a piece of white paper to dry. I kept messing with it while it was drying until I was happy with the way it looked. I think this beaded lantern turned out amazing, and I can't wait to put it on my new shelf in my living room. That is, if my husband ever gets the shelf put up. I've made the shelf, I've stained the shelf, I've bought the brackets, but he wants to make sure they're on studs, and he's the stud finder, not me. But once he gets that shelf up, this is definitely going to be sitting on it. Okay guys, I have to say, this is my absolute favorite DIY ever. I'm not kidding. This project turned out so good, I am super excited to share it with all my crafting family and friends. I used this Hobby Lobby 12-inch round and sanded it with a Dollar Tree sanding sponge to smooth out the wood. I used Waverly antiquing wax and a baby wipe to stain the entire wood round, front, back, and sides. I used a paintbrush in areas that the baby wipe didn't fill in. While the antiquing wax dried, I used my Cricut to cut out a stencil of a file I got from Design Bundles. You'll find links in the description for the products I used to create this. I used Oracle 813 masking film for the stencil. After applying the stencil to the wood, I used a thin layer of Mod Podge and a Mod Podge brush to seal the stencil. I have never had luck with stencils at all. So let's all keep our fingers crossed. I wanted as little bleed through as possible and the sharpest lines that I could get. So I tried every trick I have seen other crafters use. I let the Mod Podge dry completely before moving on. I think that is what I do wrong. I'm so impatient, I never let things dry completely. I used some Folk Art Pearl White metallic acrylic paint to apply to the stencil. And for my stencil brush, I used a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and a clothespin. I have done this before and came out with pretty good results. I like it better than the stencil brushes I have used in the past. I applied 3 layers of paint using the pouncing method. Like I said, I was trying to get as little bleed through as I could. I lightly pounced the sponge onto the stencil until I had my first layer complete. I used my heat gun to dry the paint between layers. Once the first layer was dry, I did the pouncing with the sponge again and dried it with my heat gun. And I then applied the last layer of paint and dried it. I let the last layer dry for about 30 minutes. So let's keep our fingers crossed that this works. I started removing the stencil using my Cricut weeding tool. So far, so good. I continue pulling up the stencil. It turned out perfect. I did have a couple of bleed through areas, but they were so small they are barely noticeable. I was just really inspecting it to see. I really wanted to protect my work, so I used the hard coat Mod Podge over the entire top. I applied 5 coats. Sanded with some 240 grit sandpaper between the coats, and dried it between coats with my hot air gun. I let the last coat dry completely on its own. Now to assemble the Lazy Susan. I used this 4-inch wood coaster as the base. I stained it with the same antiquing wax so it would match the top. And I also left the little felt pieces on the bottom of the coaster. I purchased a set of these Lazy Susan thingies from Amazon for another project I just never got around to finishing. I placed it in the middle of the coaster and drilled 4 small holes in the coaster. I didn't want the coasters to split when I put the screws in. I then screwed 4 number 4 1/2-inch screws into the coasters. The hardware from Amazon didn't come with any screws, so keep that in mind when you purchase it. Now that the bottom was ready, it was time to attach it to the top piece. I turned the top over so the bottom was facing me. I placed the bottom part on and found the center of the round by measuring from the edge of the hardware to the outside of the round until all 4 sides were the same distance. I screwed in pilot holes and then attached 4 more screws. And wow, look at how amazing this Lazy Susan turned out. I simply love the design and the versatility of the Lazy Susan. I can't wait to display it on my kitchen island. And the best part is it spins. Let me know your thoughts on this amazing and beautiful Lazy Susan. I'm amazed at how simple it was to put together. I will definitely be making more of these in the future. I found this sign in my stash. I got it from Dollar Tree or Dollar General one, I can't remember. I used an X-Acto knife around the inside and outside edges of the sign to score the hot glue that was holding the picture into the frame. I also used my heat gun to try to heat up the hot glue, and I used a utility knife. I don't know why, but this sucker was hard to come apart. I wish I knew what type of hot glue they used. Once I got everything removed, I decided to use the back of the picture and I painted it with apple barrel white paint and dried it with my heat gun. I got this stencil from wish.com and I thought it would make a cute vintage farmhouse sign. I sprayed the back of the stencil with Elmer's Craft Bond and let it dry for a few seconds so it wouldn't be quite so sticky. I applied the stencil to the painted board and rolled it down with my Mod Podge roller. I applied the paint by pouncing, not rubbing, onto the stencil using a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and a clothespin. I decided to paint the frame with the same black apple barrel paint I had used on the stencil. Once everything was dry, I used some Waverly steel chalk paint and a small fan brush to distress the sign. I placed dabs of hot glue in the corners of the frame and reattached the picture. I used my finger sander I got from Amazon to distress the frame and then attached twine in the holes at the top of the frame so it could be hung. I made a simple bow using some of this Dollar Tree ribbon. I love this ribbon and I'm so happy I found it. You will definitely be seeing more of it in the upcoming videos. I think it is so cute and farmhouse. I attached the bow in the corner of the frame with hot glue. And just look at how vintage farmhouse this sign is. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. I used this basket I had gotten from Dollar Tree around Easter, and I never did anything with it. So I decided to make a vintage tobacco basket with it. I've been wanting one for a while, and this was the perfect time to attempt it. To start, I removed all the stuff around the top of the basket. I say stuff because I don't really know what else to call it. I then started taking the basket apart and putting all the pieces to the side. I gently pulled all the pieces out of the weaving of the basket. Be careful when you're doing this because you don't want to break any of the pieces. After getting all of the pieces removed, I placed all the pieces of the basket in some hot water in my sink for about 5 minutes, and then laid them out on a towel and straightened them. While the basket pieces were still damp, I began creating my tobacco basket. I know it's hard to see, but the tape wouldn't stick to my silicone mat. I used painter's tape and taped down 7 of the longer pieces from the basket. Next, I began weaving the other pieces into those 7 pieces. To weave it, I simply went under, over, until I reached the other side. And then on the next row, I went over, under, and so forth. I continued doing this until I was happy with the amount of weaving. I tried to keep the distance between the pieces close to even, but I wasn't worried about them being perfect. Next, I created an X with 2 more of the pieces and attached them with hot glue. I started going around the tobacco basket and carefully bending up pieces to the size I wanted the basket to be. Once I got the first two sides bent, I went ahead and started attaching the side of the basket. I attached two end pieces first, and then attached the centerpiece. I placed all the sticks towards the outside of the basket because this is how it was shown in a video that I watched. But I think next time I will also weave the outside of the basket. Starting on this side, I did the weaving technique, and I think it looked more realistic and it held better. I would place one of the pieces on the outside and then the next one on the inside, and just work my way around the entire length of the basket. I also got smart at this point and started using clothespins to hold everything together until the glue had dried. I went around the basket and started turning down the longer pieces. And then trimmed all the pieces so they were even with the top of the basket. I glued another stick around the outside edge of the basket and again used clothespins to hold everything until the glue was dry. I did this around the entire basket. Once I was finished, I trimmed away any long pieces sticking up and glued down any pieces that had come unglued. I thought the basket was too yellow looking, so I mixed some Waverly antiquing wax and water together and applied it to the basket. I applied this mixture to both the front and the back, and I didn't wipe it off, I just let it dry. Once it was dry, it was still a little yellowish, so I added another layer of the mixture. I know the basket isn't perfect, but what is in vintage farmhouse decor? I think it turned out pretty good for my first attempt. I will definitely be making another one real soon. Let me know in the comments if you'll be trying this tobacco basket out for your home. Now for our first DIY. I was scrolling through the at-home website to get some inspiration and ran across this adorable little house. I wanted it for my living room shelf. I found this house I got on one of my yard sale adventures and decided to use it to recreate the Home Sweet Home house. The house had a raised texture to it, and I wanted mine to be smooth. The first thing I did was use a medium grit Dollar Tree sanding block to scuff up the paint. And then I got smart. Why not try a nail polish remover? I had used it on a previous project and it worked great. So I applied nail polish remover to a paper towel and began rubbing it on the house. Perfect. I used the nail polish remover on all the sides of the house to remove most of the textured paint. I then used my sanding block to remove what was left of the texture. I wasn't really worried about the paint itself, just the textured part. I used Waverly ink chalk paint and painted the entire house. And of course used my hot air gun to dry the paint quicker. This hot air gun has saved me so much time on projects because I don't have to wait for the paint to dry. It comes in handy to remove stickers from items too. I'll leave a link in the description for the hot air gun I use on a daily basis and highly recommend. Next, I created this cut file in Design Space and sized it to fit this house. I'll also leave a link for it in the description for any Cricut users who want to recreate this. I applied the vinyl to transfer paper and then to the house. I tried to make sure it was centered and straight on the house. And just look at how stinking cute this little home sweet home turned out. I love it. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel. I upload weekly home decor DIY videos, and you know you don't want to miss any of them. So go ahead and hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when I upload a new video. I picked up this large wine jug on one of my yard sale adventures in May. I knew I could use it, but I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to do with it. And then it hit me. Paint it and distress it. I washed the jug out and dried it off. I first added a layer of Waverly plaster chalk paint and dried it with my hot air gun. Let me know in the comments if you ever start a project with one thing in mind, and by the time you're done, it's something totally different. Well, that's what happened with this project. I liked it being white, but I wanted to add more texture. I added the plaster paint to a bowl and then poured in baking soda and stirred it well. I started applying the mixture with a stencil brush. It gave me texture, but it wasn't exactly what I was wanting. So I changed to a chippy brush. I applied the white mixture to the entire jug all the way to the bottom. I also painted the inside of the jug with this texture. You can really see the texture showing up. I was afraid it wouldn't show that well in the camera. I decided to give it an ombre effect and a different texture for the next layer. I poured salt into the bowl with what was left of the plaster mixture and added Waverly mineral paint. I continued adding the paint until I liked the consistency. It was thicker than the first layer I had put on. I applied this layer from below the top part of the jug all the way to the bottom. Next, I added some Waverly ink, which is just black paint, to the mixture and stirred it until I had a darker gray color. I applied this layer from about halfway down the jug all the way to the bottom. You can see here the ombre effect on the jug and all the beautiful texture. I let the jug dry for a couple of hours. I wanted to distress it so the texture would really show. I first used some Americana antiquing wax and the dry brush method. I very lightly covered the jug with the wax. Next, I used the dry brush method again, using more of the Waverly plaster paint. Now I was really starting to fall in love with this piece. Just look at all the color and texture on the glass wine jug. I even decided to try to play some music on it. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel. I upload weekly home decor DIY videos, and you know you don't want to miss any of them. So go ahead and hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when I upload a new video. I was walking around Hobby Lobby and found this large live edge wood ram. When I saw it, the first thing I thought was a Farmhouse Riser. So I knew I had to get it. I love the look of the natural wood, so I didn't want to stain it, but I did want to protect it. I applied a layer of Mod Podge to the top. Once the Mod Podge was dry, I applied Dollar Tree wood glue and hot glue to some of these little wood candle holders I had in my stash. I used the wood glue for a permanent hold and the hot glue for an instant hold. After attaching the candlesticks to the bottom, I went ahead and added another layer of Mod Podge to the top. This riser was so simple to make, and I may have spent $5 at the most. Let me know what you think about this cute little riser in the comments below. I picked up this cute little bucket at Goodwill recently. I know some of you are going to be a little shocked with what I do, but I needed a bucket for my new side table in the living room, and the pineapples just wouldn't work. The first thing I did was paint the entire outside of the bucket with Waverly Ink black chalk paint. I then put various colors of paint on a plate. The paints I used were Folk Art Metallic in Gunmetal Gray and also in Pearl White, and Folk Art Brushed Metal in Brushed Silver. I used a Dollar Tree sponge to apply the paint to the bucket. I started with the darkest color first, the Gunmetal Gray. I dabbed the Gunmetal Gray paint onto the bucket. Without cleaning the sponge, I dipped it into the second color, the brushed silver, and dabbed it around the bucket. I continued working with these two darker colors until I was happy with the look so far. I used my heat gun and dried the bucket at this point. Using a new sponge, I started dabbing more of the brushed silver onto the bucket. I started again with a clean sponge and began dabbing the pearl white on. I then went back in with the gunmetal gray color. And again with the brushed silver. This is definitely a layering process. And again with the pearl white. I did the same process on the other side of the bucket. After finishing both the front and the back, this is what the bucket looked like. I decided to go ahead and do the same process to the inside of the bucket so that it matched. I used a small paintbrush and applied some of the paint around the edge where my sponge wouldn't reach. After finishing both the inside and outside of the bucket, I sealed it with matte Mod Podge to protect it. I found this cut file at Design Bundles, sized it in Design Space, and applied it to the front of the bucket. I used my Mod Podge roller to make sure the vinyl was stuck well, and then removed the transfer tape. I absolutely love how this pineapple bucket turned into something so sweet for my living room. And who would have ever guessed it was covered in pineapples? I have to know who let out the loudest gasp when I painted over the pineapples. Let me know in the comments if you would have covered them up. I used this picture frame for my stash and some of the slats from a shutter to make an adorable little riser for some of my fall decor. After removing everything from the frame, I marked each of the slats where I needed to cut them down so that they would fit. I took them outside and cut them using my miter saw. After cutting them, I used Awesome Cleaner to clean the slats. To attach the slats to the inside of the frame, I used some Star Bond glue and accelerator. I'll leave a link in the description for Star Bond. This glue is amazing and works on almost any surface. I have used it in several videos, and trust me, if it didn't work, I wouldn't be recommending it to you. I applied the glue directly to the inside of the frame and the accelerator to the slat, and then held it in place for about 10 seconds. I did this until the entire inside of the frame was covered with the slats. I went around the outside edge with hot glue just to fill in any cracks and holes around the edge. Next, I hot glued these little wood pieces to the bottom and the corners for the feet. And I actually purchased them from Plaid also. I used Waverly Plaster Chalk Paint. This is my favorite chalk paint from Waverly. And painted the entire board and the feet. I then used Waverly Mineral Chalk Paint and a chip brush to distress the tray and the feet. I decided to go ahead and paint the bottom of the tray with the plaster paint and also to distress it for more of a finished look. And look at how beautiful this little tray or riser turned out. I absolutely love it. It is so stinking cute. Let me know in the comments what you think of the little riser. I used this little frame I found in my stash to make a boho inspired beaded ladder. After removing the embellishment from the front, I realized I would have to use the back of the picture because of the paper on the front. I used my X-Acto knife to score the hot glue that was holding in the board and pushed it out gently with my fingers. Once the board was removed, I used a finger sander to remove the paper that had come off and to smooth the edges of the frame. To reattach the frame, I used some Star-Bond glue. If you haven't used Star-Bond adhesives, you need to give them a try. I absolutely love them. They adhere quickly, and if you use the accelerator, it's even quicker. I started using Star-Bond a couple of months ago, and I'm really impressed with the quality of the product. I haven't found anything that it doesn't work on. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to take a look. I put a small amount around the inside edge of the frame and then replaced the backing. I held it down for about 10 seconds before moving on to the next step. With my drill and a bit a little larger than the wire I'll be using, I drilled holes into the corners of the backing. I then painted the entire frame and base with Waverly Plaster Chalk Paint, and of course dried it with my hot air gun. I used 20mm natural wood beads for the feet of the lantern. I placed painter's tape on the bottom of 4 of these, and you'll see why in a minute. I purchased a coil of this aluminum wire at Hobby Lobby and cut the lengths that I wanted with some wire cutters. This aluminum wire is flexible, but it will hold its shape. I don't remember what gauge it is, but it was the largest I could find. To attach the feet and the wire to the base, I filled the hole in the bead with hot glue, placed the wire through the hole in the base, and pushed it down into the bead. I did this until all 4 legs and wires were attached to the base. To make sure everything was attached well, I used more of the Star-Bond adhesive in the corners. I used the small mini attachment that came with the glue and applied it in the corners and pressed the wire against the side of the base. Next, I added 14 20mm natural wood beads to each of the wires. I get my beads from Amazon, and you'll find a link to them in the description. I decided to leave the beads the natural color instead of painting or staining them. Once all the beads had been added, I used my fingers and some pliers to bend the wire up. While I was bending and working on the top of the wire, I was also bending the wire into the shape I wanted the lantern to be, and bending the wires so that they touched each other. I had to do a little trimming of the wire so the little top piece would sit flush with the beads. To attach the top piece, I filled the hole with hot glue, placed it on the wire, and turned everything upside down while the hot glue set up. I went ahead and removed the painter's tape from the feet and cleaned up any areas where the glue had seeped through. I left the beads the natural color because I have another lantern with natural beads, but you could paint or stain them to match your decor. I added some Dollar Tree fall leaves and a candle to the lantern. And just look how stinking cute it turned out. The other lantern I made was more difficult to make because I didn't have this wire. I used skewers, so I would definitely recommend using this wire. It gives a nice curve and can be manipulated into whatever shape you desire. Let me know in the comments where you would use this adorable natural wood lantern. I'm going to be putting it on the shelf in my family room. I was scanning the Kirkland's website the other day and came across this cute little tray. I thought it was adorable and wanted to recreate it, but put my own twist on it like I always do. I had this sign I picked up at a flea market for $1, and it was the perfect size for this project. The front had kind of a texture to it, so I used some nail polish remover to get the texture and whatever paint off that I could. I then used a Dollar Tree sanding sponge to roughen up the sign so the paint would adhere better. After cleaning all the dust off, I used Waverly ink chalk paint to paint the entire box. You can use whatever color you want, I just wanted to use black. Once the paint was dry, I used Waverly plaster and a chippy brush to distress the little tray. I Mod Podged some really cute tissue paper I found at Dollar Tree to the bottom of the tray, and then realized you couldn't see it because the bottom was black. So I went back in with Waverly plaster chalk paint and painted the inside bottom of the tray. While the paint dried, I used the stencil I created on Design Space and placed it on the corner of the tray. I have a difficult time with stenciling and had another crafter recommend using something to make sure that the stencil was stuck to the project well. So I used this old gift card and rubbed the stencil on. I then used a makeup sponge and carefully applied plaster paint over the stencil. I made sure I was using a pouncing method and not rubbing the paint on. While the stencil paint was drying, I went ahead and reapplied the tissue paper to the inside bottom of the tray. And let me tell you, repainting the bottom with the plaster paint really made a difference. Now you can actually see the beautiful paper. Now to reveal the stencil. And it actually turned out pretty stinking good. For the bottom of the tray, I decided to use the little Dollar Tree squares I picked up in the crafters section as feet on the little tray. I attached them in each of the corners with hot glue. At first I was going to leave them the natural color, but decided to go ahead and stain them with Waverly Antiquing wax. I painted the wax on and then rubbed it off with a paper towel. I was going for a Kirkland dupe when I started this project, but it turned into a Designs by Gaddis original. I never know what something will turn out like until I'm finished. Does anyone else do that too? Let me know in the comments. This tray may not look like the Kirkland's tray, but I was inspired by it, and I really love the way my little tray turned out. I have several of these old red pieces of wood I found and thought they would look amazing as a vintage planter box. I used these Dollar Tree pallet pieces for the ends. They fit perfectly. I decided to try using some of the Star Bond adhesive I had gotten when I became a Star Bond affiliate. I applied the Star Bond to the bottom board and then held the top board until the glue had time to set up. And it only took about 15 seconds or so, and I had a good enough hold to move on. I did the same thing with the other two boards. Now to attach the two side pieces. To do this, I used the Star Bond glue on the Dollar Tree pallets and then the accelerator on the ends of the wood. And I'll tell you, this stuff works amazing. It really takes no time to set up. For the bottom of the planter, I used some chicken wire and stapled it around the bottom. And then trimmed it up and made sure none of the wire was sticking out. For the end pieces, I did what I would call a sloppy paint job using Waverly Crimson chalk paint. And then went over the entire piece with Waverly Antiquing wax. This really tied everything together. Just look at how amazing this vintage planter box turned out. The pictures really don't do it justice. It is absolutely beautiful. I think I may have found another one of my favorites. Let me know in the comments what you think. I got this adorable little washboard a while back from a flea market, and I think I gave $4 for it, but I can't remember. and I can't find the sticker. The first thing I did was clean it with Awesome Cleaner. I love this cleaner. It works great on most surfaces. I usually get the big refill bottle from Dollar General and keep refilling the 2 spray bottles that I have on hand. I didn't realize how filthy this washboard was until now. Just look at how disgusting it turned my paper towel. I continued cleaning it until the brown color wasn't so bad on my paper towel. I've seen other crafters use candles to give the paint a chipped look, so I thought I would give it a try. I rubbed this Dollar Tree candle all over the sign where I thought it needed to look more distressed. Next, I used my favorite color of paint, Waverly Plaster, and painted the entire washboard except for the metal part. I needed a way to not get the paint on the metal part, so I cut down a piece of this brown cardstock and laid it over the metal. Y'all know how messy I am when I paint. I usually get paint everywhere. I painted everything except for the metal. The front, the back, and both the sides. And I think I used 2 coats of paint because the first coat you could still see the dark color underneath. I used a Dollar Tree fingernail file to distress the washboard. I really couldn't tell if the wax had worked because after distressing, it looked like it would have if I would have just distressed it myself. I used the file and distressed the entire washboard until I was happy with the way it looked. If you don't like the distressed, weathered, rustic look, you could always skip this step. But the more distressed, the better for me. I found this cut file on Design Bundles and thought it would be perfect for the top of the washboard. I removed several of the elements from the cut file, sized it to fit, cut it out, and applied it to transfer paper. I applied the vinyl to the top of the washboard using my Mod Podge squeegee. I then added a layer of Mod Podge to protect the vinyl. I liked the washboard but felt like it needed something else. I used this Dollar Tree palette and some wood blocks to create a pouch for the front of the washboard. With this pouch, I can add seasonal florals and other items. I glued 2 of the wood pieces to the sides of the palette and then 1 at the bottom. I used this checkered burlap I got from Hobby Lobby to cover the pouch. I cut it a little larger than the pouch itself and used Mod Podge to attach it. Since my blocks didn't run the length of the palette, I had to figure out how to make it look like a box. I cut from the center of the burlap to just above the corner of each pallet on both sides. I hope this makes sense. And use Mod Podge to glue the burlap to the bottom of the box I was making. Next, I folded the burlap and glued it to create the box. I trimmed all the excess burlap off and added more Mod Podge. I decided to use hot glue to hold the edges of the burlap together because I was having trouble getting the Mod Podge to hold it. After everything had dried, I used this hard coat Mod Podge on the bottom of the box so I could make it more stable. I didn't want the burlap coming off or any of my floral stems poking through. I gave the bottom and the sides a good coat. I added some lamb's ear and cotton stems to the little box. I think this little laundry room washboard sign turned out so stinking cute. Let me know in the comments what you think. This project was inspired by Life with Lizette. She made this adorable countertop ladder and I just had to make one for myself. I loved it so much. I cut down some wood sticks. I guess that's what you would call them. They were in my wood pile and I thought they would work perfectly. I cut the 2 side pieces at 15 inches and the 3 rungs in the middle at 6 inches. Sorry, but I forgot to hit record on the camera for the first 2 rungs of the ladder. I looked up at the camera before I started the 3rd and hit record. I didn't use any glue. I found these long screws in some of my husband's stuff and used 6 of them to put the ladder together. I came down about 1.5 inches from the top of the ladder to place the first rung. I drilled a pilot hole through the side piece and the middle piece so the wood wouldn't split, and then used the screws to screw them in. Once I had the ladder put together, I put some water in a bowl and added Waverly ink chalk paint and mixed it well. I stained the entire ladder with this mixture. I simply painted it on and then rubbed it off with a couple of baby wipes. Once the paint had dried, I painted the entire ladder with Waverly plaster chalk paint. I did what I call a messy paint job because I knew I was going to be distressing it. Once I had the first side painted, I dried it with my hot air gun. I held the gun close to the paint so it would get a bubbling and cracking effect. I wanted the ladder to look like something that would have came out of my great-grandmother's farmhouse. Old, rustic, used, and worn. I did the same thing on the other sides of the little ladder. I had seen another crafter use a Dollar Tree emery board to distress some of her projects and thought I'd give it a try. It worked great, but I think I'll be using it on much smaller projects than this. I think my sanding block would have been a lot faster. Once I was finished, I cleaned the ladder with some water and paper towels to remove all the dust and stuff. And just look at how cute this little ladder is. I've been wanting to do this for quite a while and have been rather intimidated by it. I'm not sure why. I thought it would have been a lot harder than it actually was. For this DIY, I used this little picture frame I got from Dollar General. I thought it was the perfect size for tiere tray decor. I used a utility knife and scored around the edge on the back of the frame to loosen up the glue, and then just simply pushed the back out of the frame. I then used a box knife to pry the fish off and put the fish to the side so I could use it on another project later. I used Waverly plaster chalk paint to paint everything. I found this cut file on Design Bundles. I sized it in Design Space and cut it using my Cricut. I applied the vinyl to my picture. I wanted the sign to be double-sided. I found the scrapbook paper in my stash and decided to cut out the edge with the birds on it. I used a glue stick to apply the scrapbook paper to the picture. To attach the board back inside of the frame, I applied hot glue around the inside edge of the frame and inserted the board back in it. I then applied Mod Podge to the scrapbook paper side. I used a ruler and found the center of the frame and attached it to this candlestick using hot glue. I painted the candlestick with the same paint I had used on the frame, and then distressed it all with Waverly Elephant chalk paint and a chippy brush. And just look at how stinking cute this little tiere tray sign turned out. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel. I upload weekly home decor DIY videos, and you know you don't want to miss any of them. So go ahead and hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when I upload a new video. This DIY was inspired by Savannah at Savvy Crafts with Savannah. She used these Dollar Tree wooden boxes to create an adorable little display. I found 6 boxes that were close to the same size. You know, with Dollar Tree items, not everything is the same size or actually square. I used Gorilla Glue and hot glue and attached 3 of the boxes together. And then clamped them together. I then found 3 more boxes that were about the same size, but they were shorter than the first 3. Oh well, I can make this work. I glued and clamped this set of boxes together also. I placed the longer section of boxes on the bottom and applied my glue. Then clamped the top set of boxes to the bottom set. I let the glue set up for an hour or so. The next thing I did was figure out which drawer went with each box. This was a tricky process, and I would suggest keeping the box and drawer together. It took me a while to figure out which drawer fit into each of the boxes. After I got it figured out, I removed the boxes and set them to the side in the order that they would need to go back into the boxes. I wanted the piece to look like it was made, not just glued together. So I used some Dollar Tree spackling and applied it into all the holes between the boxes and let it dry. While the spackling dried, I used a sanding block and sanded all the drawers. And painted them with Waverly plaster chalk paint. I painted both the inside and the outside of each box. If you would like to help support my channel and help me continue to make DIYs for you, please consider buying me a coffee. All the information is in the description box below. Now back to the DIYs. After the spackling was dry, I used a 220 grit sandpaper and sanded down all the spackling until it was smooth. And then painted all the boxes with the same paint I used on the drawers. And since we all know how to paint, I'm not going to bore you with this process. I used these half beads from Amazon as the knobs for the drawers. I'll leave a link in the description for these. I saw another crafter do this trick and thought I would see if it worked. I placed the beads on a piece of painter's tape and painted them. The trick actually worked pretty well. I had 3 of these frames with the tags at the bottom. I removed the tags from the frames so I could use them on some of the drawers. I used Waverly mineral chalk paint to distress the boxes and the drawers. I applied the paint lightly using a chippy brush and the dry brush method. Don't ask me why, but for some reason I also distressed inside of the boxes. I then decided which drawers to put the tags on and attached them using a small screwdriver. The final step was to attach the half beads to the drawers with hot glue. These little boxes turned out so stinking cute. And they really will look amazing on my living room shelf. Let me know in the comments what you think of these adorable little drawers. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel. I upload weekly home decor DIY videos, and you know you don't want to miss any of them. So go ahead and hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when I upload a new video. I have some wood tags left over from Christmas, so I decided I would make a little ladybug wood tag for my tier tray. The tag was stained, so I used Waverly plaster paint and painted the entire tag front and back. I dried my tag using my heat gun because who has time for the paint to dry? I created this cut file in Design Space and applied it to the wood tag. I placed more of the Amazon ladybugs on the tag using hot glue. I had a few places that had scratches, so I touched them up with the paint. I tied a super simple bow using some red and white ribbon I had in my stash and hot glued it to the top of the tag covering the hole. And seriously, look at how stinking cute. I used a Dollar Tree picture frame and some wood from Hobby Lobby to make a cute tiara tray that can be used for any season. I removed the glass from the larger frame and marked where I needed to cut the boards. I was able to get 4 pieces out of these 2 pieces of wood, and that's exactly what I needed for the bottom portion of the tray. I took the wood outside and cut it down using a miter saw. After cutting the wood, I flipped the frame over to make sure the pieces would fit, and then they fit perfectly. For the top part of the tray, I used 8 large craft sticks and cut them down to fit the smaller frame. Just remember when you're cutting craft sticks to make sure you're using something sharp and you cut slowly to make sure you don't crack or break the sticks. I used the back of the larger frame for the bottom of the top tray. I laid the glass on the top of the backing, traced it, and cut it down to size. I used clear Gorilla Glue and hot glue to attach the craft sticks to the backing. I put the Gorilla Glue in the center of each of the craft sticks and then put hot glue on both sides of the Gorilla Glue. The hot glue gave me instant hold, and the Gorilla Glue gave me a permanent hold. For the bottom tray, I used the back of the original frame to attach the boards. I basically did the same thing I had used on the top tray using Gorilla Glue and hot glue. I allowed both of these to dry for 24 hours. I wanted my tier tray to be white, so I took both of the frames outside and spray painted them with Krylon white chalk spray paint. I did this so my frames would have a smooth finish. After both of the wood sections had dried, I used some Americana stain to stain both of them. I used a Dollar Tree makeup brush to apply the stain, and then wiped it off using a paper towel. I used matte Mod Podge on top of the stain to help protect it. I used more Gorilla Glue to attach the wood to the inside of the frame. I did the same steps with the top tray and then allowed them to both dry for another 24 hours. For the feet, I used some of these Dollar Tree little square blocks and used the same stain to stain them. And this was a rather messy process, so I would recommend wearing gloves if you don't want to get wax all over your fingers and under your fingernails. I again used Gorilla Glue to attach the feet to all 4 corners of the tray and let the tray dry for about 4 hours. For the middle section, I used a small spindle from Lowe's and cut it down. I then used the same wax to stain it. I found the center of the bottom tray and marked it with a pencil. I also found the center of the top tray and marked it. And this is when my camera battery died and I didn't even realize it. But after I found the center of both trays, I drilled a small pilot hole in each tray and attached them with screws. One going through the top of the top tray and one going in the bottom of the bottom tray. By using the screws instead of glue, the tray doesn't move at all and is very sturdy. So I'm not afraid to put something a little heavier on it, unlike some of the other tier trays I've made. And just look at how cute my fall decor looks on this small picture frame tier tray. Let me know in the comments what you think. This DIY is super simple and turns out amazing. I got 2 of these wood signs at a yard sale recently. I like them, but they just didn't really fit my decor. I cleaned the print with some awesome cleaner to remove all the dust and dirt that was on it. And I noticed some of the edges were starting to peel. I decided to go ahead and remove all the paper print from the picture. And this did take me a while. I used a box knife and just started peeling the print off. In places, I used nail polish remover to loosen the paper and to help remove the glue. I continued doing this until all the paper and glue were removed. This was a very boring process, and I'm not going to make you watch it. Once I had all the paper and glue removed, I painted the board with black chalk paint and let it dry. I found this coffee house cut file on design bundles and thought it was perfect for this sign. You'll find a link to design bundles in the description below. I sized the file on Design Space, cut the vinyl on my Cricut, weeded the vinyl, and applied the vinyl to some duck shelf liner, which by the way makes great transfer paper. You'll also find a link to it in the description. I centered the design on the board and used my Mod Podge roller to apply the vinyl to the sign. I added a layer of Mod Podge to protect and seal the sign and let it dry. The sign turned out amazing and I love it. It is the perfect accent piece for a coffee bar. If you are interested in purchasing this item, you will find a link in the description to my website where the item will be listed. I purchased this old, wobbly, worn-out table at a flea market for $4. I knew I could figure out something to do with it, just wasn't really sure at the time. I thought maybe the nails or screws were loose and that was causing the wobbling. Nope. After I turned the table over, I realized one of the legs was actually broken. I used a screwdriver and removed the screws from the legs that went into the top of the table. The table also had nails in it, so I took a scraper and started prying the legs up, and then a screwdriver, and finally a hammer to get the legs pulled from the top. I also used the hammer and some nail pullers to remove the wood pieces in the middle of the legs. Once I had everything removed from the top of the table, I used my orbital sander to remove some of the old varnish. I wanted to keep the old rustic look, so I just lightly sanded it. I wiped all the dust off with a wet rag. And just look at how beautiful this wood is. I absolutely love the look of old aged wood. Let me know in the comments how you feel about old aged wood. I recently became an affiliate with Starbond and just got some free samples in the mail, which is great because the top piece of the wood is cracked and I wanted to try to save it. I used this medium brown Starbond glue and the small tip that came with it. This tip is tiny, so it should work in the crack without having to make it any larger. I lightly pulled the wood apart and applied the Starbond in the crack all the way down the board. I then used some scrap wood and clamps to hold the top together tight until the Starbond had time to set up. After about 30 minutes, I removed the clamps and then applied a layer of Americana antiquing wax. I applied the wax to both sides of the tray with a Dollar Tree natural sponge. And then wiped the excess off with a paper towel. I found these simple brush metal drawer pulls in my stash and thought they would be perfect for the serving tray. I measured 1.5 inches in from the side and then centered the handle between the other two sides at 3 inches. I marked around the ends of the handle. At first I was going to drill holes and screw the handles on, and then I thought I would give the Starbond and the accelerator a try. I placed the glue on the wood inside of the marks I'd made and then sprayed the accelerator onto the bottom ends of the handles. I didn't speed up this part of the video because I wanted y'all to see how quickly the Starbond glue with the accelerator works. And wow, it dried that quick. I am so surprised. This stuff is great. And just look at how beautiful it turned out. I am so impressed with this tray and can't believe I made it from the top of an old table. Let me know in the comments what you think of this serving tray. I just love it. This project was inspired by Teresa at Teresa Beaded DIY. We have been in several collabs together, and she is always someone I can go to with questions. She is a wonderful creator and has a heart of gold. You will find a link in the description for her channel. For this project, I used 2 Dollar Tree bamboo cutting boards and some beads. I think these are from Walmart, but I really can't remember. I began by staining the wood and the beads with Waverly antiquing wax. That's when I realized the beads had a sealer on top of them, so I had to change my plan up. I used some 220 grit sandpaper and sanded both of the cutting boards. I then cleaned it with nail polish remover to make sure all the wax was removed. I dried both the cutting boards with my hot air gun. I decided to go with 14mm natural wood beads from Amazon. I'll leave a link for these beads in the description. I hot glued the beads around the edge of one of the cutting boards and placed them side by side, touching each other. After I had all the beads on the first board, I used hot glue again to attach the second board. I used these wood discs for the feet of the riser. I found them in my stash and can't remember where I got them. I must have gotten them when I was making jewelry a few years back, but I really can't remember. I hot glued two of the discs together and then glued them to the bottom of the riser. You could leave the riser and stain the beads and feet, but I decided to change mine up a little. I used Waverly plaster chalk paint and painted the entire thing. I paid special attention to the area around the beads. I wanted to make sure it was white. I painted the top, the bottom, all sides, and the feet of the riser. Next, I used Waverly Elephant Chalk Paint to distress the riser. I used the dry brush method and a fan brush for this, and lightly covered the wood until I was happy with the amount of distressing. I made sure to distress not only the beads in between the cutting boards, but also the discs I used as feet. This riser turned out so amazing, and it was actually an easy project to do. Let me know in the comments what you think of the riser. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel. I upload weekly home decor DIY videos, and you know you don't want to miss any of them. So go ahead and hit the bell notification so you'll be notified when I upload a new video. Please take a second to like this video and leave me a comment. This really helps my channel to grow so others just like yourself can find me. If you just found me, I hope you will join our little family by hitting the subscribe button. If you are already part of the family, thank you so much for your love and support. Y'all are the absolute best. Check out my new Amazon store for craft supply and farmhouse home decor recommendations. All the products I use from Amazon in my videos can be found there. Until next time, happy crafting.